Today I want to talk a bit about, I've been deep in the demand gen space for the last 10 years in B2B tech. And during the recent years, I have really understood the power of brand and how kind of brand shapes if demand gen is successful or not. And I want to kind of give you my take on that, both from working in-house, but also from building my startup as I am right now. So I'm actually working two jobs. I have two kids. I'm working at Rillion, which is a B2B scale up in Sweden. I'm also building my own startup on the side called Fibler, which is a LinkedIn ads tool. So it's hectic, right? But as long as we build really powerful brands, it can take us a long way. But before we go into exactly what I want to run through today, I wanted to tell you this. Like, this used to be me, and I think this is still relevant, but I have developed a little bit. I used to care about one thing in marketing. If we didn't get things into the CRM, it didn't matter. It was a waste. And kind of it had to tie back to pipeline. And I still think it's important to get input from and to get close to sales, right? To understand pipeline, to understand revenue. But what I realized over time, especially now when building my own startup, is that revenue is a lagging metric. Brand, when it's done right and people are talking about your brand, moves all of the leading metrics. So my belief now, and what I want to really run through today, is that if you want to win demand and demand gen, you have to build brand first. And I see so many companies that go wrong with that. Full blown short-term tactics works for a while, and then they fail and they have no brand to fall back on. So I want you to take you through my playbook in a while for how to create memorable brands. But before that, I want to touch upon the 95-5 rule, and you have probably seen this all over LinkedIn, but I think it's brilliant. And it says that only 5% of B2B buyers are in market to buy right now, meaning most of the buyers in the market are not ready to buy your product. And it might be like that for months, for years. But we typically try to sell our products all the time, right? And that's a general problem. We should not try to convince people that are not ready to buy that they should buy. What we need to do is to be top of mind consistently over time. And when they are ready to buy, we will be the first brand that they remember. And this is so important. Take this with you. We need to be the brand they remember when they are ready to buy. It's not up to us to decide when they are ready to buy. It's up to the B2B buyer, right? And I think we have kind of, in our short-term tactics over time, we've gotten this a bit wrong. Also, I saw this stat. I don't remember when actually, but there are somewhere close to 200,000 SaaS tools in 2025, right? Up from 30,000 in 2024. It's this entire AI builder boom. And take this with a grain of salt, but anyhow, it's increasing dramatically. Every category is getting crowded. Products are getting copied. Features are getting copied. I don't think it's very few that manage to have a really unique product. It's typically something else you have to fall back on, right? And I just put this in here to give you a little example. Like, the typical upmarket SaaS logo is blue, and it's some sans serif font style. And if you compare that with a newer edition of a company, Lovable, as you have probably heard of, which company would you remember here? I know definitely which one I would. I think it's good to have with you. And I mean, AI, it has dramatically shifted this. Made it more important when talking about brand. Like, when we built Fibler, we started 24 months ago when I first came up with the idea of building something where we tie LinkedIn ads data to the CRM data. It then took 12 months to actually build the MVP. And then we finally were able to ship the product, and now it's been live for 12 months. Now companies can ship things in days. That's equally as good as what we did. And that was only, 24 months ago. So it's changing completely the game of how we build today through AI. And obviously, very leading question here. So if product is not no longer the moat in SaaS. What is brand, of course? And I mean, brand is important in many, many ways. I'm going to come to the playbook for how you can build a successful and memorable brand soon. But before that, I want to, brand is truly what makes people remember you, how they feel when they think of you. People typically don't remember the feature discrepancy between products and companies, right? They remember what they felt in the demo meeting or when they went to the website. That's what brand can give you. Um, and this is one of the most important concepts, I think, to get right in the beginning. Not only when you're a startup, this is equally important if you're a pretty mature company, but to find the category entry points. And that is basically finding these moments when an out of the mark buyer comes in the market, right? When they are ready to act, we and our brand needs to be top of mind, and they will choose us first. An example of a category entry point could be, okay, I've just missed this quarter's target. That's the category entry point to enter the market. I will come more into this and what we did, but I think this is an important concept to have with you. And this is typically the message that we hammer in our positioning, the category entry points, that we hammer all over again. And I mean, brand is what makes us unforgettable. And we all know this from the B2C world, right? But we are just far too bad at doing it in B2B. I mean, you typically don't, you will not remember most of the things I talk about today, but maybe you will remember the giant pink lion I had on the first slide. Same thing here, right? Duo the owl, the one who actually died for a little bit, but he is back apparently. You will remember him roasting you on the bus stop. That is branding. That is what you will remember. And this is what all companies in SaaS and in B2B need today. So how do you then create a memorable brand? And I mean, take this with a grain of salt. This is my playbook and how I have done it at my startup and at various companies. You have to kind of develop it for yourself. But the first and maybe most important steps is to identify these category entry points, right? So when does someone start searching for a tool like yours? What is the moment that triggers them to come in market? I will show you in a few slides what that became for myself, but this is critical. This is the positioning. This is what we hammer on all of our different channels. What is the category entry points? And I think this kind of highlights it with the KitKat, the B2C, right? You're taking a break. That's the category entry point here. Another thing that's maybe equally important is find a distinctive brand asset. And I mean, you can select a number of things here, but you have to first understand your audience, right? What would they immediately recognize if they saw it, over and over and over again, to immediately recognize it with you? We have the classical McDonald's, we have the Apple logo, we have the colors of Spotify, we have the wording of Nike, right? We have the shapes of Coca-Cola and Toblerone, we have the sounds of Netflix. So this is so important to really think through this, because I would argue that all SaaS companies in 2025 need something distinctive that people can tell you apart from the rest, because the number of companies and competitors in your environment will only increase dramatically. Number 3, repeat. Use this distinctive asset that you've created. It can be colors, it can be how you talk, it can be a mascot. Use it everywhere. That is how people will remember you over time. Repetition is memory. Never believe that you have said anything, you know, for too much. People don't remember. You need to repeat. And fourth, and one that I think is actually quite critical, is you need to rethink distribution. And this is where we typically go wrong with demand gen and short term, right? We put a lot of efforts into demand capture, which is fine. We have to do that as well, but it needs to have a healthy balance. In ABM, as you can visualize here to the right, we typically talk about one to many, one to few, one to one. And if you are a company that sells to a very small portion, you have a very small ICP, one to one and one to few can make sense. If you have a bigger ICP, it doesn't make sense to target a small segment of your ICP. You should target your entire ICP because you have no idea who is in market and who is not. Meaning you want to be visible to all of them, and when they get in market by their own choice, you will be the company that they remember. And I mean, this is a dramatic shift that needs to happen on the more performance led and the more demand gen capture led companies, right? They typically do it way more segmented. And to give you some context into all of these steps, I wanted to share what we did with Fibler. I mean, and we have on the side now of our full-time jobs built this to, we have almost 200 paying customers now, and we are at about 250K in ARR, I think. And our success really came early from finding this clear category entry point. I mean, we're selling a LinkedIn ads tool that can help you get insights. And the category entry point was that a marketeer that cannot explain the ROI they're getting from LinkedIn ads. And how did we find that category entry point? Yeah, I experienced it, right? I couldn't explain it to my CMO and to my CEO. And that was how the tool was created in the first place. We created this distinctive brand asset, right? This pink lion together with the pink brand as a whole. And people are remembering that today. We've been hammering on about that lion in various formats for I mean 8 months now at least. And that is what people are now remembering, and not only myself. We distributed through my LinkedIn network initially that I built up over years before, right? But we also started running ads pretty early on, honestly, to broaden my network. But we ran them very broad already from the start. And I think this is critical, right? Since this is startup, I can decide on my own. It was easy to decide, okay, I want to start broad LinkedIn ads, I want to be all over the place, focus on brand. If you're at a company in-house where you already have a lot of things in place, it's of course much harder to get buy-in. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can think about doing it in steps instead. But I mean, brand is truly what makes these results come to life, more or less. And how do brand and demand then work together, which is obviously something that's critical here. And I would argue that demand gen in its sense should always be both brand and demand, but in many companies it typically divert back into being just short-term demand gen because the goals we have in terms of pipeline and revenue are insane, right? And we as marketeers, we're kind of forced to play the leads game, to play the volume game over the quality, the branding, and that can work for a while. Short term, it can give us the effects that we need, but at some point, it will no longer scale. And I like this view to look at brand and demand. I mean, brand is obviously what makes people remember us as a company and as a brand. And demand is when someone is ready and we're there. We make sure we're there. And I mean, both of these are important. But what I think is even more important is, like, a typical demand capture channel would be your Google ads, right? That's typically when someone is searching for an active solution. If you have already been building brand for a long time before this, obviously it will be much more effective as a capture channel if they already know about you. So I think that's important. Like, long-term memory in this sense, brand makes these short-term activation plays much more effective. which is why the beauty in these two together is honestly fantastic. I mean, at Fibler, where we are now, we're still so early that we're not running any short-term tactics so far, because we don't need to, because brand has taken care of all of it. And then obviously, when you want to get as effective as possible and scale, you need to do both, of course. And one of the more critical questions then, okay, do you want to focus on brand? Great. You go to your CEO and tell him or her that you want to focus on brand. The typical response you will get is, we need pipeline this quarter. We have these revenue targets. How will you achieve them? And so on. What activities are we doing? How many MQLs, deals, and so on will they generate? Which is important, of course, but I think you need to make brand make sense to the management team, to the CEO, to the CMO, to the CFO even. So, and what they understand is typically revenue, right? So you need to be able to tie brand to revenue signals. And I try to not make it too complex. I think that's how you get things done, right? I think one part is, or the easiest part to see that your brand is going in the right direction, is increasing branded search. On the bottom here, you can see, Fibler for the last 12 months. We see a clear increase, and we also see that in correlation with these spikes in branded search, 30 days after, we typically see revenue. It's a low ACV product, and we see it's obviously lower sales cycles after a free trial that we have. For a normal SaaS company that has, take Rillion where I work, that has longer sales cycles, 6 months, 12 months, this increase in branded search would correlate with revenue way down the line, right? And this is where we really need buy-in. If we are building brand today, that is then increasing, you're increasing your branded search over time here, over a few months, your revenue impact will still be much further down the line. And this needs to be bought in by the entire management team to be able to do this, right? Apart from that, I typically also like to look at pipeline and revenue coming in from direct and organic sources. So that basically people either, typing your name in directly, either your CRM can't identify them, or they have typed your brand name, right? So if all of those things are also increasing, your branded search is increasing, what you're doing is working, right? And something I've become quite passionate about recently, that I think is quite hyped right now, is founder-led marketing, right? And we're going to have another session about that today, so I won't go in too deep about it. But I wanted to talk a little bit about how I think you can think about growing personal brands together with company brands, because they are more and more growing into not the same thing, but at least things that are thriving off of each other. And I pulled these statistics from a survey a company called Winter did a while back, I think end 2024. And I mean, most people here know this, right? Buyers trust their peers and their own experience more than anything else. 80% of B2B buyers prefer to buy from people they know and trust. Makes sense. 77% engage more with LinkedIn content from individuals than companies. Also makes sense, right? And 68% have reached out to a vendor because of a personal post they saw. So obviously, building your company brand is important, but building your personal brand can be a really, really, important vessel as well for distribution. Which is why I think like the perfect combination here is to build your company brand, but also build personal brands at your company as well. Put a face to the company brand. I think that's, one of the most powerful distribution vessels that you can find today, both for startups, both for scale ups, also for more upmarket enterprise companies, right? Because there are so few people or companies doing this well. Like it's a total open playing field in terms of actually building a personal brand where you talk about things related to your product. And if I look into myself and what we built with Fibler now with almost 200 customers, I'm not sure we would even have gotten started if I didn't have a network of, I don't know, 20,000 plus marketeers before that. I mean, it's a very crowded market today, and I think it's, we have to do what we can to stand out, and I think it's easier to do that as a person than it is as a company. The problem, though, with a personal brand is that it will only scale so much. You can only be there so much. At some point, you need to build in your brand and build in everything into your personal brand. So what I typically recommend is, okay, you have identified these category entry points, you have these brand assets, and this is what I've been doing myself now, is to take all of those and intertwine them with your personal brand. Because I mean, at some point, when your personal brand don't scale, your company brand will be there to kind of take over. And I think we're seeing a big rise in this founder-led marketing right now, and I think that's great. There's a lot of companies growing through that, but I think the ones who will succeed and go the furthest will be the one who managed to build their brand at the same time, and the one who then eventually fall off will be the ones who only builds their personal brand. So I think it's an important distinction, and something you will obviously hear more about later today. That was actually all I had. So I thought I would open up for some questions here if we have any.
Thanks, Adam. Right now, we don't have any questions, but we still have around 5, 6 minutes. I have some questions for you, of course, but
Of
I
course.
just want to say that I really like that lion, and the evolution of lion is amazing. So um, I just wanted to praise it. It's
Praise the
amazing.
lion.
Yeah, it's amazing. And whenever I see it, I know what's the brand. So it's
Yeah.
it's 100% right. So one question that I have is regarding early stage startups. How can they build a brand without big budgets? That's something that is common these days. And what's your take on it?
Yeah, and I mean, it's free to build a network on LinkedIn, right? So I think that's typically where I'd
Mm-hmm.
argue that most people should start. And I mean, you don't have to be posting on LinkedIn. That's typically the most uncomfortable thing to do, right? But at
Yeah,
least, start to comment on people that you find interesting in the space. That will lead to more connections, and more connections will obviously, in the end, if you post, lead to more potential prospects. I think the most budget friendly way is to build your audience and your network at a place like LinkedIn.
definitely.
And I still, even though a lot of people now write on LinkedIn, I still think it's very few percentage of the total amount of companies that's out there. So I still think it's a big opportunity to jump on the wagon, so to say.
Yeah, it is. But as you said, it's a pretty competitive market. It's everyone is writing nowadays on LinkedIn, whatever. But what's something that sets apart the people who are definitely doing something right? Like what's their distinction?
Yeah, I think it's important to find a very clear niche. Like
Mm-hmm.
the same thing as we talked about being memorable as a brand, right? As a person, you also want to be remembered for something. And for
Mm-hmm.
myself, as an example, I'm writing mostly about stuff related to LinkedIn ads or ABM or being like a founder now. So
Mm-hmm.
if I'm writing about those three things continuously, people will eventually kind of memorize that and
Mm-hmm.
and kind of think of me when they think of those subjects. I think that is typically people write too broad in the beginning, right? But they need to niche down into something that they also feel passionate about. I think is important, of course.
And how did you define your niche? Like, is it something that is? I saw that look.
Yeah,
It's
no,
not
it,
that
it has
easy.
no, it's not. It has definitely developed over time. I think I started posting um, on LinkedIn almost 4 years ago now. And I mean, and now I'm posting, I think, 5 days a week or so, every weekday.
Mm-hmm.
But this has definitely been a journey. I mean, typically I'm a very all-in person. At some point I talked only about Demandian, right? Because I was so into finally coming into Demandian. And then eventually I got more niched into LinkedIn ads because I started working more with LinkedIn ads. So I also think it's a lot where you are in your career and in your growth journey. What are you focusing on is obviously
Mm-hmm.
something you should, yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention we have one question, but before that, I want to mention that Fibler is a really great tool. I know that you have a free demo session, so to say, free subscription, premium version,
Yeah,
and I tried it out, and it's really simple, but I think it's so effective. So
thank you.
kudos for making that tool. It's amazing. Let me show the question. What's a decent number to influence from the perspective of personal branding? Should 5K be enough to start with?
Yeah, I think 5K is great to start with. I mean, most people on LinkedIn don't have 5K followers. So
Mm-hmm.
I think you're already ahead of a lot of people. But I think most importantly as well is of course not the volume of followers. It is that it's the right people, right? I've
Mm-hmm.
been quite over the years mainly connecting with people that are similar roles to myself, right? Growth roles, demandian roles. And
Mm-hmm.
now when I'm having launching a tool that's relevant for them, we've all obviously built some trust for each other over time. Then it works to, like, if I would only promote right away, it wouldn't work. So I think it's important to build trust towards a similar persona as yourself, if you can say that,
Mm-hmm.
maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that that makes a lot of sense. So thank you for that, for sharing that. One question I had: can you share an example where strong brand positioning led to a clear revenue impact? I think that you can talk about Fibler definitely, because you said that you have like I think 250K ARR,
Yeah,
which is amazing, and you started when?
we launched 12 months ago. um
Wow, amazing.
so it's really, yeah, but of course I think it's easier to show something like that when you're a new company, you have zero revenue. Everything you do will either have impact or not have impact. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
harder when you're a mature company, and you want to start doing some branding work and you want to start building the brand, right? But I think there are so many, I mean, these AI companies coming now that I showed before, like Lovable, and those are the most, you know, it's also a Swedish company here from where I'm
Mm-hmm.
from, which we are obviously extremely proud of. They are obviously one of the most fastest growing companies in the world, and they are focusing so much on brand early on, while most of them are actually technical founders, right? So it's super impressive. Um,
Yeah.
I, yeah, I mean, it's just about standing out in a market where it's harder. Fibler, as an example, we're selling to marketeers. There are a lot of martech brands out there that are really good. I think in
Mm-hmm.
terms of technical, other technical software vendors in other industries, it might be easier to stand out. Um,
Especially when you have that lion as a mascot, I think.
exactly.
I think that it may sound funny, but it really sets you apart. I mean, not all companies have a mascot, and that's something that I notice nowadays. I don't know if you
Yeah, and I
agree.
mean, that's why it's also easier if you're a smaller company, maybe too, because everyone have to kind of buy into using the things, right?
Hmm.
If you're at the company, it's typically even hard to get the salespeople to use the most recent sales presentation, right? So it's
Yeah.
it's very different.
Yeah, it is. It is definitely. Okay, so we're running out of time, but I want to thank you for an amazing presentation, and I'm really happy to that you have been the part of Demand Conf, and maybe we'll see you next year on Demand Conf
Yeah, thank you
2026.
for having me. It was great.
Thank you. Have a great day.